My brother called me the morning of the estate distribution, not to tell me about the $214,000, to ask if I was doing okay. I know this has been hard, he said. His voice was warm, concerned, the voice of someone checking in on a grieving sister. I just wanted to make sure you were holding up. I was sitting in my car in the hospital parking garage. Level 2, same spot I'd parked in for 11 years. My coffee was in the cup holder. My first patient was in 43 minutes. I'm fine, Garrett, I said. Thank you for calling. We hung up. 4 minutes later, the estate email arrived in my inbox. He had called me before he knew I'd seen it. He had called to hear whether I already knew. That is the part I keep coming back to. Not the $214,000, not the codicil, not even what I found in my records afterward. That phone call, the warmth in his voice, the specific timing of it. My name is Cecile Voss. I am 39 years old. I have been a licensed clinical pharmacist at St. Joseph's Rehabilitation Hospital in Asheville, North Carolina for 11 years. I review medication orders. I catch what other people miss. I have documented 847 near-miss events in 11 years, drug interactions, dosing errors, contraindications that would have hurt someone if they had made it through. I keep a log, not because anyone told me to, because I believe the things worth tracking are worth tracking precisely. My mother died 14 months ago. My brother received $214,000. I received her mixing bowl. And before I tell you how I found out what I found out, please subscribe and like this video if you're just joining us, and drop a comment. Where are you watching from right now? This is my story. To understand what Garrett did, you have to understand what our family was. And to understand what our family was, I have to take you back to a Sunday afternoon when I was 9 years old, sitting at the kitchen table with a math worksheet. I had finished it in 11 minutes. I knew because I had timed myself. I had a digital watch my father had given me the Christmas before, and I timed everything back then. I was proud of those 11 minutes. I brought the worksheet to my mother in the living room. She looked up from the couch where she was sitting with Garrett. He was 14, long-legged, sprawled out the way teenage boys sprawl, the way that announces they own whatever space they're in. Mom, I finished my whole worksheet, 11 minutes. She smiled. That's wonderful, sweetheart. She looked back at Garrett. He was telling her something about baseball practice. About a kid on the team who had been giving him trouble, about how the coach didn't see it. Her hand was on his arm. I stood there with my worksheet. After a while, I went back to the kitchen and put it in my backpack. I did not show her my grades again until I was in college, by which point the habit had been set for so long that showing her felt strange, like speaking a language you'd been told was incorrect. I am not telling you this, so you will feel sorry for me. I am telling you this because Garrett understood very early that our mother's attention moved like water toward the path of least resistance, toward the need most recently expressed, toward the person who required the most management. He understood that being the person who required the most management was an asset in that house, and he cultivated it the way some people cultivate a skill. By the time he was an adult, he had made himself indispensable in the specific way of a person who has made themselves the problem and the solution simultaneously. Kawaza. My father died in 2011. Heart attack. 63 years old on a Tuesday morning in March. Gone before the ambulance arrived. I want to tell you about the week after his funeral. Garrett flew in from Charlotte, where he was living then. He stayed at our mother's house. Of course, he stayed at our mother's house. He slept in his old room and ate at the kitchen table and received the casseroles the neighbors brought and accepted their condolences with the gravity of a man bearing tremendous weight. I drove from Asheville every day that week, 40 minutes each way. I handled the insurance paperwork. I called the bank. I sat with the estate attorney and took notes because my mother couldn't concentrate. She was grief-hollowed, quiet, unlike herself, in a way that frightened me. I coordinated the obituary. I arranged the catering for the reception. On the fourth day, Garrett's firm called him back for something urgent. He left on a Thursday afternoon. He hugged my mother for a long time at the door. "I'll be back as soon as I can," he said. He looked at me over her shoulder. "You'll be here, right?" "I'll be here," I said. He nodded once, the nod of a man delegating. He drove away. He was back in Charlotte by evening. I stayed for 3 more weeks. I am not saying this was wrong of him. I'm saying this was the arrangement. This was how it had always worked and how it continued to work. Garrett made gestures, large, visible, emotionally resonant gestures, and I did the things that needed doing quietly without an audience. The problem with doing things quietly without an audience is that there is no record, or there is, if you make one yourself. Here is what I need you to understand about my mother's illness. She was diagnosed with early-stage vascular dementia in July of 2020. I was the one who drove her to that first neurology appointment. I sat in a waiting room with plastic chairs and a television on mute and a rack of pamphlets about cognitive health, and I read those pamphlets twice while I waited. And when Dr. Harrington came out to speak with me, I had questions ready. Specific questions. The kind you can only ask if you have already spent a week reading the literature. He seemed surprised. "You're a pharmacist," he said. "Clinical hospital setting?" He nodded slowly. "Then you understand what we're looking at." "I understand what the progression typically looks like." I said, "I want to know what it's going to look like for her specifically." He told me. He was honest in the way good physicians are honest. Not brutal, but not vague. He told me what to watch for, what to document, when to be concerned about her decision-making capacity. He told me she should not be making major financial decisions alone. He told me that she would likely become susceptible to suggestion in ways she herself wouldn't recognize. I drove home and wrote everything down. I called Garrett that evening. "Dr. Harrington says she's going to need support for major decisions," I said. "Financial decisions especially. We should both be involved." "Of course," Garrett said. "Absolutely, we're a team." I believed him. I want to be precise. I believed him. I want you to remember that, because what I did next, every transfer, every payment, every bill I covered, I did as someone who believed we were a team. I was not naive. I simply had not yet understood what kind of team we were. My mother's furnace failed on a Sunday night in February 2016. She called me at 9:47 p.m. I know because I still have the call log. She didn't call Garrett. She called me. "Cecile." Her voice was small, embarrassed. She hated asking for things. "It's very cold in the house." "How cold?" "I don't know. I can't find the thermometer." I'll be there in 40 minutes. It was 54 degrees inside. I found the thermometer. I brought 2 space heaters from my car. I had started keeping them there that winter along with a bag of emergency supplies because I had begun to understand that her calls to me were not going to stop and I would rather be prepared than unprepared. The HVAC company came Monday morning. The repair was $2,847. I put it on my visa. My mother stood in the kitchen in her robe and watched the technician work and said, "I'll pay you back when I have it liquid." "Don't worry about it," I said. I did not tell Garrett. There was nothing to tell. The furnace was fixed. My mother was warm. That was the outcome. That was how I understood it then. Outcomes were what mattered. I was not keeping score. I was solving problems. But I kept the receipt. I'm a pharmacist. I keep everything. Summer 2017. Her roof, 2 sections over the back bedroom and the sunroom. She'd been ignoring it for 2 years. I know because I had noticed the stains on the ceiling the Christmas of 2015 and mentioned them. And she had said she'd look into it, and then she hadn't. The sections failed in a rainstorm in July, and she called me at 6 a.m. from her cell phone, standing in the kitchen because the bedroom ceiling was dripping. Why didn't you call the roofer? I said, driving north on I-26 with my coffee still in my hand. I didn't want to bother anyone. Mom, you've been watching the ceiling leak for 2 years. I thought it would resolve. Ceilings do not resolve. I did not say this. I found a contractor. The estimate was $8,400. She had $3,000 in accessible savings. I transferred $5,400 from my savings account on a Thursday morning. I had been saving that money for 14 months. I had a listing open on my laptop, a condo on Lexington Avenue, close enough to the hospital to walk, with a kitchen that got afternoon light. I looked at the listing one more time before I opened the transfer screen. Then I closed the tab. I called Garrett after the transfer went through. I covered the difference on Mom's roof, I said. $5,400, just so you know. Thanks, Cece, he said. I'll get you back. He never mentioned it again. Spring 2019, this is the one I have turned over the most. My mother called on a Sunday, the warm, bright voice she used when she was about to ask for something. Cecile, I need to talk to you about Garrett. Something tightened in my chest. Is he okay? He's going through a hard time. A business setback? He just needs a bridge loan, just to get through the quarter. He has a financial advisor who says if he can just cover the remaining balance, the cash flow will stabilize. How much? A pause. $14,600. I sat very still. Mom, I don't have... I stopped. I have it, but it's my emergency fund. He's your brother. I know he's my brother. He would do the same for you. I want to tell you what I said next. I want to tell you I asked for a repayment timeline. I want to tell you I said, let me think about it, and gave myself 48 hours and made a rational decision. I transferred $14,600 the following Friday. Garrett texted me one emoji, a thumbs up. That was it. That was the total acknowledgement of $14,600 moving from my emergency fund into a problem I had not created. One thumbs up emoji. Yeah, I saved that text. I don't know why. Force of habit. I save everything. 2020 and 2021. After the diagnosis, the expenses changed shape. They became less dramatic and more constant. The cleaning service, $280 a month because she could no longer manage the house alone. The grocery delivery, the copays for specialists that Medicare didn't cover. 2 home health aid visits, $340 each out of pocket because the Medicare window had closed. And every Sunday, 40 minutes north to fill the pill organizer. I had set it up in August of 2020. 7 compartments, color-coded. I labeled the days in my handwriting. The precise, small handwriting I use when something matters. I came every Sunday morning. I checked the previous week's compartments to make sure she had taken everything. I restocked. I checked the refrigerator. I made tea. I stayed for an hour. Garrett called on Sundays. He did not drive 40 minutes. I did not resent this at the time. I want to be honest about that. I had made a choice to be present in the way I was present, and Garrett had made a different choice. And I told myself that different people contribute differently, and the outcome was what mattered, that my mother was cared for, and that was enough. I was wrong to tell myself that. Not because I should have done less, because I should have required more accountability from the person who was doing less and collecting more. Total, February 2016 through February 2021, $47,380. Every transfer, every credit card charge, every contractor invoice with my name on the payment line. Filed in a blue folder in the second drawer of my desk. I did not keep that folder because I suspected something. I kept it because I keep everything. That folder is the reason this story has a second act. I need to tell you about the Tuesday in March of 2021 when my mother called me at 7 a.m. I was at my desk. The dispensing unit was running. I had 2 medication reconciliations due before 9. Cecile, the warm, bright voice. I wanted to let you know that Garrett was here this weekend. I know, he mentioned it. We had a good talk about the future. A pause. About arrangements. The domino feeling again. Small, one tile falling, maybe touching the next. What kind of arrangements? I said carefully. Just the estate planning, making things simpler. Garrett has a financial advisor who thinks it would help to consolidate the management side. Mom! I set down my pen. Any changes to the estate documents? I need to be part of that conversation. I'm on the deed. I'm on the accounts. Of course, of course. This isn't about the deed. It's about management, day to day. He's closer. Mom, I need you to send me whatever documents they're preparing before anything is signed. Can you do that? There aren't documents yet. It's just preliminary. Promise me. A small pause. Of course, sweetheart, I promise. 6 days earlier, I had driven her to her March 8th cognitive assessment. I had sat with Dr. Harrington. I had heard him say moderate progression, susceptibility to suggestion, supported decision-making before any major financial instruments. I had not connected those words to a phone call that would come 6 days later. I drove to her house that Sunday. It's the Sunday after the call. I filled the pill organizer. I checked the refrigerator. I made tea. She held my hand while we watched her program. Her hand was warm and small, the way it had always been. You know, I think about both of you equally, she said, casually. The way she said things that were not casual. I know, Mom. I drove 40 minutes back to Asheville. I did not know that on March 14th, 2021, she had signed a document. I did not know because she did not tell me. I did not know because Garrett did not tell me. I did not know for 23 months. If you're still with me, drop a comment right now. Have you ever been the person who showed up every single time and still been the last one to know something important? Yes or no? I want to know. The accounting document arrived on a Thursday afternoon, 8 months after my mother's death. I had requested it 3 weeks earlier. Full accounting of all assets per my rights as a named beneficiary. The estate attorney had been pleasant and efficient and had taken 3 weeks to produce 41 pages. I was at my desk in the pharmacy, dispensing unit running, a medication reconciliation half finished on my screen. I opened the document. I read it column by column, page by page, not for the story, except for the discrepancy. The codicil was on page 7. Amendment to Last Will and Testament of Margaret Ellen Voss. Executed March 14th, 2021. Transfer of liquid assets totaling $214,000 to the Margaret Voss Family Trust, administered solely by Garrett Thomas Voss. I read it twice. Then I opened my phone calendar. March 8th, 2021. Drive mom to Dr. Harrington, 2 p.m. Cognitive assessment follow-up. March 14th, 2021. 6 days later, the codicil. The thermometer in my chest dropped several degrees. I pulled up Dr. Harrington's clinical summary from March 8th. I had it. I was her secondary care contact. I had access to everything. I had read the summary. I had noted the moderate progression. I had not, at the time, thought about the specific phrase, susceptibility to suggestion. Recommend supported decision-making consultation before execution of any major financial instruments. That note had been sent to her primary care physician. It had not been sent to her attorney. Someone had been very careful about who received that note. I sat at my desk until the dispensing unit beeped twice, reminding me I had a reconciliation due. I finished the reconciliation. I stayed until 6 p.m. I drove home. I made dinner. I ate at the kitchen table. I looked out at the mountains. Then I went to the second drawer and got the blue folder. $47,380. Every receipt, every transfer, every invoice. I laid it next to the estate accounting on the kitchen table, and I sat with what I was looking at. My brother had been in our mother's house the weekend before she signed the codicil. He had been there while her neurologist's notes were flagging her susceptibility to suggestion. He had been there with his financial advisor's recommendation. He had been there with his warmth and his concern and his particular talent for being exactly what the moment needed. And then he had called me the morning of the distribution to ask if I was holding up. He had called me to hear what I knew. When I realized that, I felt something I don't have a precise word for, not rage, not grief, something colder than both. The specific temperature of understanding arriving 11 years too late. I opened my laptop. I typed a state litigation attorney, Asheville, North Carolina. The first result was Francis Okafor, 22 years of practice, office on Lexington Avenue. I called and left a voicemail at 8:43 p.m. Oh, I called Garrett at 9 p.m. He answered on the second ring. Hey, Cece, you okay? There it was again, that warmth, that concern. The voice of a man who had spent his entire life understanding exactly what the room needed from him. I went through the estate accounting today, I said. A pause, very short. 1 beat, 2. Yeah, it finally all came through. I know it's a lot to process. The codicil was executed March 14th, 2021, I said. 6 days after Mom's cognitive assessment showed moderate progression and flagged her for supported decision-making. Silence. Garrett, you were at her house that weekend. Cecile. His voice changed. The warmth didn't leave. It just moved back, made room for something harder underneath. Mom made her decision. It was her money. She had the legal right. Legal capacity and neurological fitness aren't the same standard. You know that. I told you what Dr. Harrington said when she was diagnosed. I specifically told you. She was fine, Cecile. She was present. She was lucid. She knew what she was. Did she know I was on those documents too? My voice was very quiet. Did she know that when she signed it, she was removing me without my knowledge or consent? A longer silence. She wanted to simplify things, he said finally. She was scared about the future. She didn't want things to be complicated. She was susceptible to suggestion, and you had a financial advisor in her living room 6 days after a neurologist told her not to make major financial decisions without consultation. I stopped, breathed. I have $47,380 in documented contributions to her care from 2016 through 2021, transfers, credit card statements, contractor invoices. Every dollar. That was your choice. It was. And I'm not asking to be repaid for love. I'm asking for what the documentation supports. I picked up the pen on my desk, held it. I've retained a state litigation attorney. Her name is Francis Okafor. You'll hear from her office this week. Cecile. His voice dropped. Quieter. Something in it I hadn't heard before. Not anger, not the careful warmth. Something rawer. You want to take our mother's estate to court. You want to put her memory through that. After everything, I said. Yes, I was there. The rawness again, closer to the surface now. I was the one sitting with her at 2 a.m. when she didn't know where she was. I was the one calling her doctor when she was scared. You drove 40 minutes on Sundays, and you think that makes you... I drove 40 minutes on Sundays for 4 years, I said. I drove 40 minutes to her neurologist appointments and her specialist copays and her grocery runs and the Sunday morning when her furnace failed and the Tuesday morning when her roof was dripping. I transferred $14,600 to cover your business loan in 2019. You sent me a thumbs up. I stopped. He let that sit. 1 emoji, Garrett. That's what $14,600 was worth. I heard him exhale, long and slow. You kept records, he said. His voice was different now, flat. Of course you kept records. I keep everything, I said. You know that. He hung up. I put the phone face down on the desk. I looked at the mountains in the dark. Then I opened the blue folder one more time and began making copies. Here's what I did not expect, Dana, Garrett's wife. They had been married 9 years. She had always been warm to me in the particular way of women who are warm to everyone. Genuinely kind, not performing it. At the Thanksgiving, when my mother was first struggling, Dana had been the one to pull me aside in the kitchen and say quietly, "How are you doing?" Not just with her, with all of it. I had said I was fine. I always said I was fine. She called me on a Tuesday evening in October, 3 weeks after I had filed the challenge with Francis. "Cecile," her voice was low, careful. "Garrett doesn't know I'm calling." "Okay. All right. I've been going through our financial records since Francis filed." A pause. Since before that, actually, since the graduation ceremony. I need to tell you about the graduation ceremony, but first, the $14,600. I went very still. "He told me that money was from a business investor," she said. "He never told me it was from you. I found your transfer in the records last week. There's a note on his side. Your name, the amount, the date. He categorized it as investor funds." Her voice was careful and even in the way of someone who has rehearsed what they need to say. "He categorized your loan to him as an investor contribution, which means it was never going to be repaid. He never planned to repay it." I sat down. "Donna, there's more." She exhaled. "The March 2021 weekend. He told me he was visiting your mother to help her organize some papers. I didn't ask what papers. I should have asked. I didn't." A pause. "He came home that Sunday night, very calm, very settled. He made dinner. I remember thinking he was in a good mood. The room was very quiet." "I'm sorry," she said. "I don't know what to do with any of this." "But I thought you should have it." I found my voice. "Thank you for calling. Cecile, for what it's worth." She stopped, started again. "You deserved better from all of us." She hung up. I held the phone for a long time. Then I called Frances. "I have a new witness," I said. "She's inside the marriage. She has financial records." Frances was quiet for a moment, then, "Can she be reached directly?" "Yes." "Then we have something to work with." I need to tell you about the night before the mediation. This was 6 months after the challenge was filed. Frances had been working the case methodically, the way she works everything, column by column, discrepancy by discrepancy. The March 8th clinical note was in the record. Dana's testimony about the financial categorization was in the record. The 6-day timeline was in the record. Garrett's attorney had been in contact. They wanted to settle before it went further. The night before the mediation, I sat at my kitchen table with the blue folder open in front of me, and I did something I had not done in 11 months. I read through everything from the beginning. The furnace receipt from 2016. The roof invoice from 2017. The bank transfer record showing $14,600 leaving my account on a Friday afternoon. The specialist copay receipts. The cleaning service invoices with my credit card number on each one. I have a particular way of going through paperwork. Methodical, unhurried. I don't let myself react until I've finished reading. I finished reading at 11:30 p.m. Then I allowed myself to react. I sat there in my kitchen and I cried. Not for the money, not for the codicil. I cried because I had spent 11 years being the person who handled everything and asked for nothing, and I had told myself that was who I was, that I was simply the kind of person who showed up, who documented, who managed, and somewhere in there I had forgotten to check whether the people I was managing things for actually knew what that cost me, whether they saw it, whether any of it registered. My mother had held my hand at the kitchen table and said she thought about both of us equally. She believed that the gap between the story and the record disappears. She loved me. She saw me as capable and reliable and present. And she mistook capable and reliable and present for needing less. I got up, I washed my face, I made tea. I looked at the mixing bowls on the counter. 3 of them, brown glazed, stacked. the ones she had bought in 1987 at a shop in Black Mountain. She had used them for everything, every Christmas, every Sunday, every time she made cornbread from the recipe that had been in her family since before I was born. I picked up the largest one, turned it in my hands. Heavy, slightly uneven, holds heat. I put it back. I went to bed. I slept well. The mediation was at Francis's office, a conference room on the second floor of the Lexington Avenue building, long table, water glasses already filled. Garrett arrived with his attorney. I had not seen him since the October dinner at his house in Weaverville. He looked not different exactly, smaller. The word that comes to mind is smaller. The way a person looks when the version of themselves they have been maintaining in their own mind doesn't quite line up with the room they are actually standing in. He sat across the table from me. He looked at the blue folder in front of me. He looked at me. I looked back. I did not look away. Francis opened. She laid out the timeline. March 8th, assessment. March 14th, codicil. She quoted the neurologist's clinical note directly, which she had done before in written filings, but which landed differently spoken aloud in a room with 4 people in it. A patient demonstrates decreased executive function and increased susceptibility to suggestion. Recommend supported decision-making consultation before execution of major financial instruments. She paused after reading it. Garrett's attorney said something about the legal standard for testamentary capacity. Francis responded with 3 citations. I had read those citations myself, twice at the kitchen table on the night I found the codicil. I knew what they said. Then Francis opened her folder and placed Dana's documentation on the table. Garrett's jaw tightened. Just slightly, just once. He had not known Dana had spoken to me. His attorney leaned over and said something in his ear, very low. Garrett listened without moving. Then he looked at me. What do you want, Cecile? His voice was flat. A fair accounting of the estate, I said, and reimbursement of documented contributions. The $47,380. The $47,380. He looked at the table. He looked at his attorney. He looked at the water glass in front of him. Then he said, in the relationship. I looked at him for a long moment. He was asking me something real, not strategically. He was genuinely asking. I don't know yet. I said, I need the accounting first. Then I need time. Then I'll know. He nodded once. The mediation took 4 hours. We reached a settlement. The specific terms are between Francis and Garrett's attorney and the mediator, and I am not going to detail them here. What I will say is that the blue folder closed at the end of those 4 hours in a different way than it had ever closed before. Lighter, somehow, even though its contents hadn't changed. That was 5 months ago. Garrett and I are not in contact, not yet. I have not decided whether that changes. Dana sent me a text 3 weeks after the mediation. Just, I hope you're okay. I'm proud of what you did. I read it and thought about it for 4 days and then responded, thank you. I hope you're okay too. I meant both sentences. My mother's ceramic mixing bowls are still on my counter. Last Sunday, I made cornbread in the largest one, the recipe from her family, the one she had made in that bowl for 40 years. It came out exactly right. The bowl held the heat in a way modern bowls don't. I stood at my kitchen counter and ate cornbread and looked out at the mountains, close and visible in the clear March morning, and thought about nothing in particular for a while. That is new, the nothing in particular. For 11 years, I thought about what needed doing. For 14 months, I thought about the codicil. For 5 months, I thought about the mediation. Now I am learning what it feels like to sit in my kitchen on a Sunday morning and just exist in it. It's like I am a pharmacist. I review other people's records for a living. I find discrepancies. I document what I find. I flag what needs flagging. I had been applying that skill to everyone except myself. I am applying it to myself now. The blue folder is still in the second drawer. The label is faded. I wrote it in 2016 in a ballpoint pen I no longer have. The folder is thinner now. Most of what was in it has been submitted as evidence, scanned, filed with a mediator, distributed to attorneys. What remains are a few receipts that were tangential to the case, things that documented care without documenting cost, moments that mattered to me specifically. The furnace repair receipt from February 2016, I keep that one. It was the first. If you have ever been the person everyone calls but nobody checks on, the person who is always described as capable, always described as reliable, the person around whom everyone else organizes their own inability to show up, you know what it costs. You know the specific exhaustion of being needed without being seen. And maybe you also know the specific disorienting feeling of the day you decide to read your own records with the same attention you've been giving everyone else's. That is what the story is. That is what I hope you take from it. Not that you should document everything, though you should. Not that you should trust carefully, though you should. But that the attention you give to others, the careful precision you bring to caring for everyone around you, you are allowed to turn that toward yourself. You are allowed to ask what it has caused. You are allowed to find out. I'm 39 years old. I still park on level 2. I still take the stairs. I still review the overnight intake notes before my first patient. Some things you don't change. But I eat lunch now every day away from my desk. I take the 20 minutes. I sit by the window on the 3rd floor and I look at the mountains and I let the dispensing unit run without me for a little while. It turns out the mountains really are as close as they look. I just had to stop telling myself otherwise. Thank you for staying until the end. If this story meant something to you, like it, share it, subscribe. I'll see you in the next ones.